Good morning. Well, here we are in Miss Wetherby's life in 1940. This second novel follows the life of Clementine Wetherby during the onset of World War II in England. The narrative follows her transition from a quiet life in India to the grim realities of wartime London, including blackouts, rationing, and the construction of air raid shelters. Well, central to the story is Clementine's relationship with her solicitor, Jeremy, and her efforts to support her friend Aadhirai and their neighbours, the Smart family, who are reeling from a local scandal and the vicar's imprisonment in Germany by Nazis. Throughout the chapters, the characters navigate social class tensions, legal tribulations, and the growing psychological burden of an uncertain future. Ultimately, the novel provides a vivid look at domestic resilience and the loss of innocence as the threat of total war looms over their daily routines. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the AI. And if you would like to subscribe and ring that bell to support the channel, that would be fantastic. Enjoy.
Imagine you're just walking down your quiet, leafy suburban street.
Right.
You know, you've just had a lovely dinner, the air is getting a bit crisp, and it's dark, like very dark.
Pitch black, really.
Exactly. So naturally, you reach into your pocket and flick on a flashlight, just for a second, just to see the pavement so you don't, twist your ankle.
Which is a huge mistake in this context.
Oh, a massive mistake, because instantly, out of the pitch black shadows, this man lunges at you. He smells heavily of stale beer. His face is just contorted with rage, and he starts screaming at the top of his lungs.
Just terrifying.
Right. He's yelling that you're a spy, a traitor, that you're actively trying to guide enemy bombers right onto your neighbor's roofs. He demands you put out that bloody light before he has you arrested. Welcome to London, September 1939.
It is such a stunning, violent collision of everyday life and absolute existential panic. And it sets the tone perfectly for what we are looking at today.
It really does.
We tend to view history, especially a massive global conflict like World War II, through the lens of a clean, dramatic narrative.
Yeah.
Like, we like to think there was before the war and after the war began, with this neat, bold line drawn between the two.
Right. It's comforting to categorize it that way, broken or not broken, at peace or at war.
Exactly.
But when you step into the actual lived experience of the home front in those very early days, it's totally different. Like when you get into the messy psychological reality of the people on the ground, that clean narrative completely shatters, doesn't it?
Oh, it falls apart entirely. You're looking at a historical and emotional landscape that is just completely murky. It's a time of profound cognitive dissonance.
And that muddy, confusing, terrifying reality is exactly where we are heading today. Welcome to this deep dive. I'm so thrilled you're joining us because today we are immersing ourselves in an incredibly rich, complex, fictional world.
And it is such a vivid world.
It really is. Now, for some context, this is the second novel from a saga of 5 describing Miss Wetherby's return to London. And the setting for this specific installment is late 1939, stretching right through those grim, unpredictable months to the end of 1940.
It's a brilliant window of time to explore, honestly. This period is often referred to as the phony war, the months before the Blitz truly devastated London. And it's just ripe for psychological exploration.
Because the threat is everywhere, but the actual bombs haven't dropped yet.
Exactly. The physical destruction hasn't fully materialized,
Right.
So people are just sitting in this agonizing limbo.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore how this specific novel masterfully intertwines the macro terror of World War II, like the looming threat of the Luftwaffe, the sudden draconian rationing, the controversial internment camps, with the micro dramas of domestic life.
Because the domestic stuff doesn't just pause for a war.
Right. While governments are declaring war, individuals are still dealing with, hidden seller secrets, vicious local scandals, and incredibly complex family mysteries.
It's the juxtaposition of world-ending stakes with the petty, everyday realities of living in a community. The author does an exceptional job of showing that even when the world is seemingly ending, human beings still hold grudges. They keep secrets.
They still worry obsessively about what the neighbors think.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
maybe even more so.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the blackout wardens and the secret cellars, we really need to set the scene for you. Imagine our protagonist, Clementine Wetherby.
Our anchor in all this chaos.
Yes, she is a wealthy, unmarried woman who has just returned to England after spending 40 years living in India. And her departure from India wasn't exactly a leisurely planned retirement, was it?
Far from it. No, she left India following the tragic, brutal murder of her parents in a riot. So she has inherited substantial wealth, yes, but she is also carrying this massive, unresolved burden of trauma.
Which is heavy. So she arrives in Wanstead, which is this quiet, comfortable, leafy suburb of East London, and she's just expecting to find a sanctuary.
She just wants a break. Let's be real.
Exactly. She buys a house. She's meticulously decorating it in the latest sleek deco style. She's setting up her new household with her close friend Aadhirai, who, traveled with her all the way from India.
Right.
She's just looking forward to drinking a nice cup of special blend tea in her newly decorated bedroom and just breathing.
But history has other plans, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really does.
Instead of a quiet retirement, she steps right off the boat into a country that is frantically, almost hysterically, preparing for total, unprecedented war.
Oh.
And that brings us to the immediate jarring shifts in everyday life, the sheer absurdity of the new normal.
Let's go back to that opening image I painted for you, the blackout. Clementine is out walking one evening.
Right.
She's just had a lovely, totally normal dinner with Jeremy Howarth, who is her solicitor and also a budding romantic interest. And she uses a flashlight, a torch, just to see her way. Just a quick flick at the light.
Which, under the newly minted wartime regulations, is strictly forbidden. I mean, the government had enforced a total blackout to prevent cities from becoming visible targets for nighttime bombing raids.
So she flicks the torch, and immediately she is aggressively berated by this drunken cobbler. He has enthusiastically signed up to be an ARP warden.
Air raid precautions.
Right, air raid precautions. And he accuses her of being a fifth columnist. Now, hold on. For someone listening who might only know the broad strokes of World War II, what exactly is a fifth columnist? Like, why is this cobbler jumping straight to that accusation over a flashlight?
It's a crucial term to understand the paranoia of the time. A fifth columnist basically refers to a clandestine group or faction of subversive agents who attempt to undermine a nation's solidarity from within.
Like spies living next door.
Exactly. The term actually originated during the Spanish Civil War, but by 1939 in Britain, it had become the ultimate boogeyman. The government was running these massive propaganda campaigns warning citizens that German spies were everywhere.
Just living among them.
Yeah, living among them, preparing to sabotage infrastructure or signal enemy aircraft.
So to this drunk cobbler, Clementine isn't just a woman who tripped in the dark. She is an active enemy agent trying to guide the Luftwaffe to Wanstead. He screams at her to put out that bloody light.
And objectively, yes, he is doing his duty by enforcing the curfew. But the author writes this scene not just to show us the rules of the blackout, but to show us what those rules trigger internally.
And it's terrifying. She drops the torch, the glass breaks, the batteries pop out and roll away. She is just plunged into total darkness with this aggressive, shouting man.
And instantly, she isn't in London anymore.
No. Her mind is violently thrown into a traumatic flashback to her time in India 40 years prior.
The novel details this so vividly. In her mind, she is a teenager again. She's wearing this off-the-shoulder white French silk ball gown embroidered with sequins. She had wandered away from a party into the gardens of a colonial governor's house.
Right.
And suddenly, an Indian soldier in a brown uniform jumped out from behind a bush and thrust a rifle with a fixed bayonet right into her face.
And she had fainted dead away back then, the sheer terror of it. And now, 4 decades later, in a polite London suburb, that exact same visceral terror is resurrected.
Not by a soldier with a bayonet, but by a slightly drunk cobbler with a shouting voice.
It's brilliant because it shows us how the stress of the home front isn't just about the current war. The atmosphere of constant vigilance and fear acts as this psychological catalyst.
What's fascinating here is how the text uses these physical preparations for war to highlight the internal fragility in the characters. I mean, they're busy trying to build physical defenses.
Like blackout curtains and sandbags.
Taping of windows, all of that.
Yeah.
But their psychological defenses are completely crumbling under the weight of the unknown.
Speaking of physical defenses, the domestic preparations happening in Clementine's own garden are just darkly comedic. You have Mr. Titchmarsh, her perpetually pessimistic gardener.
He's quite a character.
Oh, he's great. And a local builder, Mr. Connell, They're out in the mud constructing these bizarre wooden frames. Clementine looks out her pristine deco window and literally cannot fathom what they are doing.
Right, she goes out into the garden, arms akimbo, completely bewildered, and Titchmarsh proudly announces they are building bunk beds for the Anderson shelter.
And for those who haven't seen one, an Anderson shelter was essentially a small corrugated steel tent that you buried half underground in your back garden and covered with earth.
Yeah, they were famously miserable.
Cramped, damp, freezing cold, and highly prone to flooding. And Titchmarsh is out there building 4 bunks to fit inside this metal tomb.
Clementine is just incredulous. She literally says to them, "Who do you think we are?"
Yeah.
Girl Guides. She tells them they might as well pitch a canvas tent and go camping.
I love her reaction because it's so honest. It's a perfect encapsulation of the class divide and the profound denial of the era. Think about it. She's a wealthy woman who has just purchased beautiful French-style vanity tables for her bedroom.
Right.
The idea of sleeping in a freezing hole in the muddy ground alongside her domestic staff is entirely alien to her. It just doesn't compute.
But Titchmarsh represents the grim, unvarnished reality of the working class. I mean, he remembers the First World War. He remembers the Zeppelins.
He knows what's coming.
He bluntly tells his employer that the raids will happen at night, the bombs will fall, and they will be huddled down in that hole for hours on end, whether she likes it or not.
She eventually capitulates, but the cognitive dissonance she experiences is wild. I was trying to think of how to describe this feeling to you, the listener. It's exactly like, imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table and someone is urgently trying to teach you the incredibly complex, dense rules of a brand new high-stakes board game.
Okay, I like this.
You know, you have to learn the mechanics of identity cards, the exact way to fit a gas mask, the complex math of petrol and meat rationing, how to use a stirrup pump with buckets of sand.
The rules are just endless and bureaucratic.
Right. But here's the mechanism of the dissonance. While you're sitting there desperately trying to memorize these micro rules, your actual house is slowly catching fire. You focus all your mental energy on the minutia of the board game, because if you look up and acknowledge the flames, your brain will simply break.
That is a phenomenal way to explain it. The phony war period was defined by this intense, almost suffocating bureaucratic preparation. The government gave people thousands of tiny tasks to do, because if they didn't, the macro threat of total annihilation would paralyze the populace.
It's busy work for survival.
Exactly. The characters are completely overwhelmed by regulations, and the media environment only makes it more surreal. The BBC is constantly broadcasting, but the tone is incredibly jarring.
Oh, the radio scenes are insane. So Clementine is in her kitchen boiling her morning eggs. She's very particular. She likes them hard, not runny. And she's listening to the radio. The BBC is playing this perky, jaunty, light jazz music, real tap-your-toes kind of stuff. And then abruptly, a dry, mature, entirely emotionless male voice cuts in to announce terrifying geopolitical disasters.
The Soviet Union has invaded Poland. Or, all theaters, museums, sports grounds, and places of public entertainment are to be closed immediately by order of the government. And then, without missing a single beat, back to the gay, perky music.
It creates this surreal, almost dreamlike atmosphere. The literal end of the world as they know it is being announced between jaunty show tunes. How do you process that?
You don't. You compartmentalize it in the strangest ways possible. Which brings me to one of my favorite details in the book, the reaction to the cricket season.
Yes. The novel highlights a very specific historical detail here. The gentlemen versus players cricket matches in the county championship games were abruptly halted on September 1st. Wait, why September 1st specifically? Like, what stopped a gentleman's game of cricket?
It followed the announcement of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was a non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. When that was signed, the British government realized that war was absolutely inevitable and imminent. The order went out for immediate, total mobilization.
So the men playing cricket were needed in uniforms, not cricket whites.
Precisely.
So Clementine is at the butcher. She manages to buy a leg of lamb, which is becoming a rarity. And looking at the meat triggers this nostalgic, idyllic memory of her father playing cricket in India.
It's a powerful memory.
She remembers the men in their crisp whites, the delicate tea served on the terraces, the buttered crumpets, and when she fully realizes that the war has effectively killed the English cricket season, she genuinely mourns it. I mean, the characters in this town mourn the end of cricket almost as intensely as they fear the German bombers.
Which sounds completely absurd to a modern ear, but psychologically it makes perfect sense. The cricket season represents order. It represents tradition, rules, fairness, and safety.
It's the old world.
Its cancellation is the undeniable, tangible proof that their world has fundamentally fractured.
Yeah.
The abstract threat has become a reality that dictates their leisure.
But the reality of the war doesn't remain abstract or bureaucratic for long. It literally arrives on Clementine's doorstep.
It really does.
She's out walking near her home, trying to clear her head, and she sees heavy-duty military lorries massing on the open green land just 100 yards from her road. Soldiers are jumping out, digging deep trenches, building corrugated iron sheds, and then a massive crane arrives.
It unloads a hideous giant anti-aircraft gun right onto the peaceful Wanstead Flats. And massive barrage balloons, these giant silver blimp-like structures meant to entangle enemy aircraft, are being prepped and inflated.
For Clementine, this is the visual shock that finally shatters the illusion of the phony war. The blackout curtains, the ration books, the identity cards, those were just inconveniences.
Bureaucracy.
Right. But seeing a massive heavy metal instrument of death permanently erected right next to her newly decorated sanctuary, that causes her blood to run cold. The macro terror has officially, physically invaded her microdrama.
The war has arrived in Wanstead. But what's really vital to understand about Clementine's character is that she isn't one to just sit in her deco bedroom and wait for the bombs to fall. When she feels a loss of control, she finds a way to assert it.
Exactly. And this transitions us wonderfully into how Clementine operates in this new world. If the government and the war are taking away her agency, she decides to use the one thing she still has in abundance to buy some of it back.
Her wealth.
Her wealth. She begins to use her considerable purse as both a shield against the war and a weapon for social justice in her local community.
Which brings us to the primary target of her philanthropy, and one of the most tragic subplots in the novel, honestly, the local vicar's family, the Smarts. Their situation highlights the devastating collateral damage of the war on the home front, far away from any battlefield.
It is an absolute nightmare of a situation. The father, Reverend Smart, is described as a deeply moral, upstanding man. Before the war officially broke out, he was visiting Europe.
Just terrible timing.
While there, he witnessed 2 young girls being assaulted by Nazi soldiers, and he stepped in to physically defend them. As a result of this bravery, this quiet Church of England vicar was arrested and is now languishing in a Nazi prisoner of war camp. No one in Wanstead knows if he is alive or dead.
He is a hero, but his heroism leaves his family, his wife, Lillian, and his daughters, Nora and Celia, destitute and completely socially vulnerable back in England.
Nora manages to secure work as a maid for Clementine, which helps. But it's the situation with the other daughter, Celia, that really drives the vicious local scandal.
Yeah, Celia's story is heartbreaking.
Celia is a bit wilder, a bit more naive than her sister. She gets caught up with a manipulative man who uses her to distribute what the local court vaguely calls immoral material. She is arrested, she is initially denied bail, and she is sent to Holloway Prison.
Holloway was a notorious women's jail in North London, and the novel uses Celia's harrowing experience there to deeply explore the theme of social stigma. I mean, you have an entire country supposedly uniting to fight fascism and oppression abroad, yet the local community in Wanstead acts with vicious, judgmental cruelty toward one of their own.
The details of Celia's return are visceral. While she was in Holloway, there was a severe lice outbreak in her wing. The standard treatments didn't work, so the prison authorities simply shaved her head.
It's just awful.
All her beautiful hair, gone. She returns to Wanstead looking pale, sickly, trembling, and almost unrecognizable. And you would think, listener, wouldn't you, that a community would rally around this traumatized young woman whose father is rotting in a POW camp.
You'd hope so.
Yeah.
But they absolutely do not. She returns home an utter pariah.
Her own best friends cross the high street to avoid speaking to her. The women from the Church Institute completely ice out her mother, Lillian. And the final blow comes from Mrs. White, the owner of the local bakery where Celia used to work.
Oh, this scene made me so angry.
Celia goes in, hoping to get her job back so her family can eat. Mrs. White fires her outright, to her face, stating that decent customers wouldn't want their daily bread and rolls handled by a person with her, quote, activities.
It's a stunning display of hypocrisy. And on top of this complete social excommunication, there was a looming bureaucratic threat. Because Reverend Smart is imprisoned and unable to fulfill his duties, an opportunistic local clergyman named Reverend Hewlett is circling the vicarage like a vulture.
He's the worst.
He is. The bishop is making administrative noises about giving Hewlett the living, which means Hewlett would take over the church and the vicarage house, legally evicting the Smart family and rendering them entirely homeless in the middle of a war.
It made my blood boil reading it. And this is where Clementine's wealth becomes a fascinating, almost aggressive narrative tool. Clementine realizes the limits of her power. She cannot stop the Luftwaffe from bombing London. She cannot storm a Nazi camp in Europe and break Reverend Smart out.
But in the tiny microcosm of Wanstead,
Yes, with a massive bank balance, she has immense power. She can effectively play God.
she hatches a bold, aggressive real estate maneuver. The large house right next door to hers belonged to a Mr. Bennett, who recently passed away. Clementine decides she's going to buy it outright in cash and convert it into a safe haven.
Like a boarding house.
Exactly, a boarding house for the Smarts, for her dying former nanny, Alice, and anyone else who needs refuge from the cruelty of the storm.
But of course, even an act of pure charity is fraught with conflict in this town. The house is being sold at a public auction by Mr. Bennett's sister, a spiteful, immaculately dressed, deeply unpleasant woman named Mrs. Gilbert.
She really is a piece of work.
And Mrs. Gilbert explicitly tells Clementine to her face that she will not sell the house to her, no matter how high she bids.
Clementine demands to know why. And Mrs. Gilbert sneers at her, saying, because I simply don't like you, and my brother and your uncle's reputation goes a long way towards that decision.
We'll get to that mysterious uncle in a minute because, wow, that is a whole other layer of crazy. But Clementine is not easily deterred. She gets her solicitor, Jeremy Howarth, to attend the auction at the Ilford Town Hall as a proxy, bidding on her behalf so Mrs. Gilbert won't know it's her money until the hammer falls.
The auction confrontation is one of the most superb, tense scenes in the book.
Yeah.
Jeremy coolly secures the house for £1,200 in cash.
Which is a staggering sum for the time.
Huge. When Mrs. Gilbert realizes he was bidding for Clementine, she loses her mind. She causes a massive, venomous public scene right outside the town hall, shouting, gesticulating, trying to invalidate the sale.
Clementine is waiting in her car nearby. She steps out, walks up to this screaming woman, and just unleashes on her. She looks Mrs. Gilbert dead in the eye and tells her, "You lost today. Go and buy yourself a bottle of cheap gin and revel in the money. You lost not only your brother's house, but also your dignity."
It is a fierce, almost ruthless defense of her territory.
I have to say, though, I kind of love it, but it also feels a bit gross. Like, she essentially crushes Mrs. Gilbert with sheer capital. It raises this uncomfortable point about how wealth completely insulates Clementine from the rules everyone else has to follow.
That's a very fair point.
She is performing a great act of social justice. She immediately offers the shaved-headed, disgraced Celia a job in her own house to save her from destitution. But she is doing it through sheer, brute force financial dominance. She buys her way out of the social strictures.
You're absolutely right to point out that friction. Clementine is using her money to fight stigma. But the novel also beautifully suggests that the war itself, the shared trauma of it, acts as a profound equalizer for that stigma. The money buys the house, but the war creates the empathy.
Oh, that's interesting.
We see this with Celia. The social weapon with his shaved head eventually finds a profound healing connection, not through money, but through shared pain.
Yes. She volunteers at a local convalescent home for wounded servicemen. And there, she meets Peter, a young, paralyzed pilot. Now, what's crucial here, and you have to explain this because the psychology is fascinating, is that Peter's paralysis isn't physical. His spine isn't severed.
Right. Peter's plane went down off the coast of Dover. He was trapped, he nearly drowned, and he experienced absolute terror. When he was finally rescued and pulled from the water, his legs simply stopped working. He couldn't walk.
But the doctors couldn't find anything wrong.
The military doctors examine him and can find absolutely no physical neurological cause.
So if his spine is fine, why is he in a wheelchair?
It is a psychosomatic manifestation of severe trauma. In World War I, they called it shell shock. Today, we might understand it as a severe form of PTSD or conversion disorder.
Right.
The psychological trauma is so overwhelming, so impossible for the brain to process, that the mind literally shuts down physical function to cope. The terror converts into physical paralysis. The medical establishment of 1940 was often deeply unsympathetic to this, viewing it sometimes as cowardice or hysteria.
But Celia isn't a military doctor. She is a young woman who has been deeply traumatized by the justice system, by prison, and by social ostracization. She understands what it means to have your identity stripped away.
Exactly.
So when she meets Peter, she doesn't judge him. She connects instantly with a man traumatized by the war. The strict societal rules of Wanstead that declared Celia ruined completely fade away in the face of this shared broken humanity.
It's a quiet, beautiful rebellion against the harsh judgment of people like the bakery owner. Celia and Peter find a sanctuary in each other that Clementine's money could never buy.
It is beautiful. But, listener, you think Clementine buying the Bennett house was going to neatly solve all her problems and result in a nice, wholesome boarding house full of healing and cups of tea? You are spectacularly wrong.
She certainly was, because moving from Clementine's charitable intentions in the daylight, we have to pivot to the horrific discovery lurking beneath her new property in the dark.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly incredibly disturbing. Celia and her sister Nora go next door to start cleaning the empty, dusty Bennett house to prepare it for the boarders.
Right, just doing their chores.
They are scrubbing the floors and they keep sweeping up endless amounts of rabbit droppings.
Which is strange enough in a suburban house.
Very strange. And then they find a locked, heavy door leading to a room in the cellar. They manage to pry it open, get inside, and what they find is not a dusty storage space for old jam jars. It is a fully equipped, hidden, subterranean photographic studio.
And the visual tableau the author paints is deeply macabre. It is filled with horrifying, disjointed elements.
It's like a nightmare.
It really is. There are human skeletons. There are the intricate gleaming brass and steel inner workings of timepieces and clocks scattered everywhere among the cameras. And the floor is entirely covered in rabbit droppings.
When Celia and Nora run back and tell Clementine, she marches next door, goes down into the cellar, takes one look at the skeletons and the clocks, and literally cuts off mid-sentence.
She knows immediately it's bad.
She orders the girls out of the house immediately. She locks the cellar door, locks the front door, and runs to call Jeremy Howarth, her solicitor.
The author drops this dark, almost gothic, true crime subplot right into the middle of a World War II narrative. We have to ask why. Why have a hidden room of skeletons, clocks, and animal filth?
Well, it connects back to that cryptic insult Mrs. Gilbert hurled at the auction, the reputation of Clementine's Uncle Cyril. It becomes agonizingly clear that Uncle Cyril and the late Mr. Bennett were involved in something deeply illicit, likely an Edwardian underground ring involving macabre photography, pornography, or exploiting vulnerable people, using the clockwork and skeletons as bizarre props.
From an analytical standpoint, this cellar is highly symbolic. It represents the rotting moral core of the Edwardian and pre-war era that Clementine has inherited.
Ooh, I like that.
She came back to England from India looking for a pristine, nostalgic past, a world of cricket and tea. And instead, she buys a house that literally has skeletons in the closet. The clockwork scattered around is deeply evocative of the Edwardian obsession with mechanics, order, and control, now lying broken and disgraced among animal droppings. It's the hidden, festering decay of the upper classes.
I love that symbolic reading, but what Clementine and Jeremy actually do about this discovery is highly, highly morally ambiguous. Jeremy comes over, they look at the evidence, and they decide to execute a complete covert cover-up.
Yeah, Jeremy packs all the illicit materials, the glass photographic plates, the physical evidence of whatever crimes were committed down there into a large old suitcase belonging to Clementine's late father.
And he uses the blackout. The very thing everyone in the city is terrified of, he uses as cover.
It's quite ironic.
He sneaks the suitcase out of Wanstead, drives his car into central London in the pitch dark, and just leaves the suitcase in a phone box near Scotland Yard, tipping off the police anonymously from another phone.
He essentially launders the evidence.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on this. Jeremy is an officer of the court. He is a lawyer. Clementine is positioning herself as the moral savior of Wanstead, fighting for the smarts. Yet, they both actively, deliberately tamper with a crime scene and hide evidence. Isn't he risking disbarment or worse, prison?
Absolutely.
Are they really doing this to protect the innocent victims in those photographs by getting the evidence to Scotland Yard? Or are they just protecting Clementine's upper-class status and her family name from a dirty public scandal?
That is the exact, profound, ethical gray area the novel wants you to wrestle with. They justify it to themselves by saying, well, the police have the evidence now, the victims might get justice. But they entirely circumvent the justice system to protect themselves from association. They use their privilege to wash their hands of it.
But the psychological stain remains.
It does. It forces Clementine to confront her past. She realizes she has to find her Uncle Cyril and see the monster for herself.
Yes, she tracks him down to the East End, to a place called Kibble's Engineering in Leytonstone. She goes expecting to find a debauched, horrific villain, and the man she finds completely upends her expectations.
It's quite a twist.
He's working a meager job as a night watchman. He tells her he's been saved by Jesus. He claims he has completely given up drinking, and he just sits in his little wooden guard hut reading the Bible all night.
He claims to have found total spiritual peace, absolved of whatever sins he committed in that cellar. Clementine gives him £10 to help him survive. But she leaves with this profound itch she cannot scratch. Because encountering Cyril, seeing him claim this neat, tidy redemption, brings up an even older, darker family secret that no one wants to talk about.
Right.
The cellar discovery forces her to confront the mystery of her niece, Ada.
Which brings us to one of the most utterly fascinating, enigmatic characters in the entire novel. Ada's backstory is incredibly tragic. For years and years, she was believed to be mentally impaired.
Yet, the dark family lore, whispered behind closed doors, is that when she was a young child, her father, or possibly Uncle Cyril, the lineage is deliberately murky, accidentally poisoned her meal.
The physical trauma of the poisoning supposedly left her cognitively stunted. Her brain stopped developing. Because her father couldn't cope with a disabled child, she was sent away, hidden out of sight, to live with Clementine's Aunt Selma in a large, isolated house in Highgate.
And she lived there for 9 years in this total mental fog, a child trapped in a growing body.
But then, miraculously, as an adult living with Clementine, she is in the kitchen, and she accidentally drops a heavy kitchen knife right onto her foot.
The shock of it is just wild.
The sharp, sudden, intense physical pain acts as this bizarre neurological shock, and she essentially wakes up. The fog lifts. Her cognitive functions return.
It's a spontaneous remission of a trauma-induced state. But she doesn't just return to what we would consider normal. Ada serves as the novel's mystical anchor. She emerges from this decade-long mental absence with an uncanny, completely unexplainable gift for clairvoyance.
It's so spooky. She begins making these eerie, highly accurate predictions about the people around her.
Oh, they are chilling to read.
Right. One morning, they're all just sitting, having breakfast, eating porridge, and Ada just starts muttering, "Slippery, slip, slip. Let's be careful. It's so slippery." Clementine, who is very pragmatic, ignores her.
Naturally.
But later, that exact same day, Aadhirai is walking down the high street, slips on a patch of treacherous winter ice outside Sidehole, boots the chemist, breaks her wrist in 7 places, and suffers a severe concussion.
It's not just slips and falls either. Ada predicts the severity of the Blitz long before the bombs drop, basically foreseeing the second Great Fire of London in her mind's eye. She acts as a human barometer for danger.
She even senses darkness and pain surrounding Jeremy's severe secretary, Miss Gordon.
Yes.
And she senses something deeply, dangerously wrong with Nurse Williamson, a woman who comes to care for Jeremy's ailing mother. Ada just looks at this professional nurse and says one single word: dogs.
Which deeply, visibly unnerves the nurse, hinting at some dark secret of her own. But think about how disruptive this is. In a world that is desperately trying to maintain order, a world tearing itself apart with bombs, bureaucracy, and logical military planning, Ada represents an intuitive, unexplainable truth that science and the law simply cannot quantify or control.
Which is deeply threatening to someone like Clementine, who relies on order and wealth to fix things. So what does Clementine do? She forces Ada to go see a medical specialist, a Dr. Barnard, in his fancy office in Harley Street.
Ah, Dr. Barnard.
Dr. Barnard perfectly represents the supreme arrogance of modern clinical science. He sits in his expensive leather-bound office, smelling faintly of tobacco, casually adjusting his expensive cufflinks, and he completely, utterly dismisses Ada.
It's infuriating to read.
When she tries, very earnestly, to explain her sudden awakening and these powerful intuitions she's having, he patronizes her. He smiles condescendingly and tries to steer the conversation back to quantifiable, sterile medical jargon. Ada is highly perceptive. She realizes instantly that he thinks she's crazy, and she completely shuts down.
The taxi ride home from that appointment is agonizingly tense and silent. Clementine is furious that she wasted the expensive consultation fee, and Ada is furious that her reality was mocked and disbelieved.
But this friction, this need to prove her sanity, pushes Clementine to finally investigate Ada's past. They take Jeremy and drive up to visit Aunt Selma's supposedly abandoned property in Highgate, where Ada spent those 9 foggy years.
Only to find it isn't abandoned at all.
No. A man named Nicholas Stevens is living there. He claims Aunt Selma adopted him back in 1910 and left him the property. And when they start asking about Ada's time in the house, a bizarre, intense battle of timelines erupts.
Nicholas recognizes Ada, yes, but he insists she was profoundly mentally retarded the entire 9 years she lived there. He tells Clementine that Ada was basically an infant in an adult's body, completely unaware of her surroundings until she was taken away. He disputes her timeline and her memories completely.
But Ada proves her lucidity. She proves that a part of her consciousness was always awake, always watching, even from deep inside the fog.
This is my favorite part.
She leads Clementine, Jeremy, and Nicholas out of the house and into the wildly overgrown back garden. She walks straight to an old, rotting, wooden clothesline post and points to exactly 8 notches carved deep into the wood. She looks at Nicholas and says she remembers Aunt Selma measuring her height on her birthday every single year, carving those notches.
It's a magnificent scene. It provides beautiful, undeniable physical proof of her existence, her memory, and her personhood. Nicholas is stunned into silence.
And listener, I want you to put yourself in Clementine's shoes for just a moment. Imagine trying to maintain a stiff upper lip, dealing with ration books, trying to find black market eggs, taping up your windows against bomb blasts, and meanwhile, you are living in a house with a niece who casually predicts catastrophic, bone-breaking injuries over morning porridge.
That's a lot to handle.
How do you integrate the supernatural, the unexplainable, into a world that is already catastrophically unpredictable?
It creates a tremendous psychological strain. And Ada's uncanny ability to see through people's facades, to see the absolute truth behind the masks they wear perfectly, mirrors the novel's larger and perhaps most important exploration. Who are the real enemies on the home front?
This is where the novel expands its scope brilliantly and where the author really twists the knife. We shift our focus from the skies above London, where the literal enemy is flying, to the streets of Wanstead, looking at intimate stories of prejudice, internment, and deep-seated local hypocrisy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the novel presents the government's internment policies and the actions of the local police as stark, undeniable realities of the era. The most poignant and heartbreaking example of this is the tragic case of Wolfgang Weiss.
Wolfgang is a young, gentle German man who worked as a steward on the ship that brought Clementine and Aadhirai back from India. He was kind, polite, and the novel is explicit that he is a fierce non-Nazi.
His parents back in Berlin are school teachers who actively refuse to vote for Hitler and are terrified of the regime.
But because he holds a German passport and is physically in England when war is declared, he is arrested at Tilbury Docks. He is eventually interned in a military camp in Sandwich, Kent. We're just relaying the facts of the novel here, but the ironies of his situation are incredibly brutal.
Yeah, Clementine receives a desperate letter from him and travels down to the coast to visit him. He is a German non-Nazi, but the internment camp in Sandwich is predominantly holding German Jewish refugees who fled the regime. Because Wolfgang is culturally German and speaks with the same accent as the men who tortured them, Wolfgang is brutally beaten by his fellow inmates.
It's a horrific, inescapable catch-22. He has to hide in a dilapidated shed and only use the camp latrines in the dead of night to avoid being attacked. He is hated by the English guards for being German, he is physically beaten by the Jewish refugees for sounding like their oppressors, and he lives in absolute paralyzing terror that the British government will simply deport him back to Germany.
He tells Clementine that if he is sent back, he will face the guillotine for his family's political views.
Clementine, using her wealth and status again, offers to vouch for him, to legally sponsor him and take him into her house. But Wolfgang is completely broken by the system.
He tells her there is no chance the government will allow it. He expects to either remain a political prisoner indefinitely or be sent to his death. His story illustrates how the sweeping, indiscriminate bureaucratic policies of war crush the innocent individuals caught in the middle.
And this xenophobia isn't just institutional, locked away in a camp in Kent. It's highly interpersonal. It's happening in the shops in Wanstead. Look at Aadhirai's struggles.
Aadhirai is a highly educated, sophisticated woman. She is legally a British subject, having traveled from India, which was part of the empire, yet she faces constant grinding microaggressions in Wanstead.
The local butchers blatantly ignore her in the queue. They will serve every white woman behind her until Clementine physically intervenes and demands service.
Worse, despite being a British subject, the bureaucratic paranoia at the time forces her to regularly report to the local police station to sign a register officially documenting herself as an alien.
The war empowers petty prejudices. People use the guise of national security to exercise and justify their own bigotry. We see this intersection of paranoia and policing with the black market as well.
Oh, the chicken incident?
This is such a great scene. So Bert, a local white boy character who knows everyone's business and always has a scheme going, drops by Clementine's house with a Christmas present. He leaves a freshly plucked chicken wrapped in newspaper on her hall table.
Now, meat is strictly rationed. Getting a whole chicken is a massive deal, and it's clearly black market meat, circumventing the strict government rationing laws.
And moments later, as if they smelled it, Inspector Gilbert and a police sergeant appear banging at her front door.
Inspector Gilbert aggressively demands to search Clementine's larder without a warrant. He accuses her point blank of harboring black market goods.
Clementine, relying heavily on her class privilege and the lingual jargon she picked up from Jeremy, absolutely refuses to let him cross the threshold. She tells him to come back with a magistrate's warrant and her solicitor present.
He backs down, but it showcases the intense, almost suffocating policing of everyday domestic life. Your kitchen larder is no longer a private space. What you eat for dinner is suddenly a matter of national security.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what the author is doing is illustrating that war doesn't just feature battles in the sky between Spitfires and Messerschmitts. War fundamentally fractures civil society from the inside out.
It exacerbates xenophobia, it forces vulnerable people into internment or into the shadows of the black market, and crucially, it makes dangerous secrets out of private loves.
Which brings us to perhaps the most revealing moment of hypocrisy in the book, The Hostile Neighbors, Miss Constance Hill and Miss Millie Robinson. From the very moment Clementine moves in, these two women are constantly defensively rude.
Miss Hill marches over and demands Clementine's gardener cut back tree branches that are shedding leaves over their fence. They are frosty, distant, and overtly hostile at every turn.
You assume they're just unpleasant, bitter women. But then a bizarre medical incident occurs. The two women are suddenly taken severely ill, vomiting and collapsing, and are rushed to the hospital with acute poisoning.
It turns out two local boys, aged 13 and 14, had been sneaking into their garden stealing apples, and somehow they ingested a toxic substance used for pest control.
But this medical crisis, this sudden vulnerability, forces a massive revelation. When Clementine discovers them ill and has to intervene, she realizes the real reason for their constant defensive hostility.
They are secretly in a same-sex romantic relationship. Clementine later tells Aadhirai she saw them sleeping together in the greenhouse.
Now think about the stakes here. In 1940, that is a secret that could completely ruin their lives. It could cost them their jobs in the medical field, invite police scrutiny, and result in total social exile. Their hostility wasn't just them being mean, it was a carefully constructed shield.
They were aggressively rude to keep people away, to protect their private love from a society that would criminalize them. Under the guise of wartime suspicion, they weaponized hostility as a literal survival tactic.
It's a profound realization, but what is equally fascinating is Clementine's reaction to this discovery.
Yes, I have to call Clementine out here.
She uses this revelation to tell Aadhirai, who had actually been quite friendly with Millie at the hospital, that she must immediately keep her distance from them. Even Clementine, who views herself as progressive, who is willing to fight the whole town for the disgraced Smarts, draws a hard, unforgiving line at homosexuality.
It shows the absolute limits of her own tolerance. She isn't a modern hero retrofitted into the 1940s. She is a product of her time with her own prejudices.
It perfectly encapsulates the overarching theme of this deep dive. The home front is a place of masks. Everyone is hiding something because the stakes of being exposed are incredibly high.
And the ultimate, most pathetic symbol of this home front hypocrisy has to be Harry Perry.
Harry owns the local radio shop. Clementine invites him to dinner one evening, and he paints this elaborate, tragic picture of himself as a lonely, grieving bachelor. He's actively courting Clementine, trying to spark a romance, playing the victim.
He plays the part perfectly. Until Nora, the maid whose ear is always pressed to the ground of local gossip, informs Clementine that Harry's entirely legally married.
His wife, Millie, didn't die. She left him on Christmas Eve because of his immense, unbearable selfishness.
Clementine is furious. She marches right down into his shop and confronts him amidst all the radios. And Harry's defense is just pathetic. He admits he lied simply because he was deeply ashamed of his life and his failures.
He used the chaos of the war, the massive disruption of normal social networks where people were moving and disappearing, to try and completely reinvent himself. He tried to hide his true, flawed self and pretend to be a romantic hero. It's petty, it's deceptive, and honestly, it's so incredibly human.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize all these disparate threads, from Wolfgang shivering in the internment camp to Harry Perry lying in his radio shop, from Ada's chilling visions over breakfast to the clockwork skeletons in the Bennett cellar, we see the true power of this novel.
Right.
Miss Wetherby's life in 1940 is not simply a historical story about surviving the Blitz. It is a profound, intricate exploration of navigating the shrapnel of human relationships.
Exactly. It shows us that literature allows us to see the micro-humanity within the macro-historical events. The bombs are terrifying, yes, but the real, grinding daily struggle for these characters is dealing with the moral complexities of internment, the ethics of buying black market chickens, the burning stigma of a shaved head, and the dangerous secrets we keep from the people living right next door.
Clementine's world is a masterclass in resilience, not just against the might of the Luftwaffe, but against the petty, crushing weight of society itself.
It forces you as a reader to acknowledge that history isn't just made by politicians signing treaties or generals moving troops on a map.
History is made by the drunken ARP wardens yelling in the street, the exhausted maids sweeping up rabbit droppings, the clairvoyant nieces carving notches in a clothesline post, and the women hiding their love in a greenhouse. They are all, in their own flawed ways, just navigating the dark together.
Navigating the dark. I love that. And that brings me right back to the blackout where we started. We talked earlier about how the darkness of the blackout allowed Jeremy to hide a suitcase full of illicit Edwardian secrets, dropping it by Scotland Yard unseen.
And how the chaos of the war allowed people like Harry Perry to hide their true identities. The darkness was a profound terror, but it was also a cover.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. If the lights went out in your city tonight, if the blackout curtains were drawn, the sirens wailed, and the normal, everyday rules of your society were suddenly, indefinitely suspended, what hidden parts of your own life would you finally bring into the dark?
That's a great question.
And perhaps more importantly, what would you fight to keep in the light? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an absolute privilege to explore this complex, fascinating world with you. Until next time, keep reading and keep asking the big questions. Take care.